Good afternoon, my name is Camden and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over some of the books that I really want to reread. I am actually not much of a rereader. There are a few books that I've read multiple times. Usually they're like my top favorite books of all time. But generally speaking, once I put a book down and I finish it, I will never pick it up again. Not because I don't want to, but I simply just don't have the time to like reread books when there are new stories to enjoy. So yeah, 9 times out of 10, I'll choose to read a new story over an old story. But recently I found myself having a bit of a hankering to delve into some old books, so I thought I'd put a list of those together for you. I've actually broken this list out into a few different categories because there are actually several different reasons why I want to reread books. So the first category is books that I really loved and really want to re-experience. And the first book in that category is the Inkheart Trilogy by Cornelia Funke. I read this book series in like middle school or early high school, and I really loved it. The concept of being able to read something out of a book or being able to read yourself into a book was really appealing to me at that time of my life. And fun fact, I actually had a huge crush on Reread, who is the love interest of the series. But anyway, I recently rewatched the movie adaptation of this book that has Brendan Fraser in it, and it inspired me to want to reread the books. A little bit of Inkheart lore for you is that the character of Mo in the book was actually based on Brendan Fraser because he read the audiobook of Cornelia Funke's other book, Dragon Rider, and they actually became great friends from that, and she based a book character on him and his beautiful voice. The next series in this category is the Song of the Lioness Quartet by Tamora Pierce. I read these ones in, again, I think like middle school or early high school. Sometimes I really feel like they just don't make fantasy novels like they used to back in the day, and I know that makes me sound old, but I can't describe like the vice grip that these books had on me in middle school and early high school, which leads me into my third series, which is the Protector of the Small series, also by Tamora Pierce. Both of these series really dealt a lot with women breaking into industries that were dominated by men, facing prejudice, dealing with misogyny, trying to prove themselves, and really overcoming a lot of obstacles. And that was very valuable to me at that age and very inspirational. So I'm excited to revisit. The last series in this category is the Kane Chronicles by Riordan. This series, I feel, was very underappreciated compared to the Percy Jackson series, but it ended up being my favorite of all of his books. If you don't know, this series focused around Egyptian mythology as opposed to Greek mythology, and it follows a brother and sister who are kind of estranged and just getting to know each other, and they find out that they are hosting the god Osiris and the goddess Isis inside of them. And obviously adventures get kicked off from there in true Rick Riordan style. But yeah, I felt like there was a ton of hype for Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus series, and even afterward the Trials of Apollo, books like that, but I never really saw the same hype being directed at the Kane Chronicles, but they ended up being my absolute favorites, so I'd really like to reread them at some point. The next category of books is going to be series that I started but never finished, and thus I must start them all over again in order to read the last book or the last few books. So the first book on this list is the Fallen Kingdoms series. I honestly do not remember how many books are in this series at this point. I know I read the first 2 and possibly a bit of the third, but I never finished the third and I never continued on, and I would like to do so. I'm not going to be able to sit here and tell you that this series was the greatest of all time or it was especially unique or groundbreaking, but I was really enjoying it at the time that I read it, and maybe if I reread it now I will realize it wasn't really worth continuing on with, but I feel like I have to delve back into the story to really determine if it's worth finishing or not, and I do intend to do that at some point. This one is certainly not top of my list of things to do, but I would like to get around to it in the next couple years, maybe. A book series that I did really enjoy and do think is rather groundbreaking was the Graceling series by Kristin Cashore. Books 1 and 2 were good but not great, but book 3, Bitter Blue, I thought was absolutely amazing. This book delved really deep into the emotional side of the character of Bitter Blue and had a lot of character growth in it. It got really dark and intense towards the end, and I absolutely loved it. And now there is a 4th book out. I think it's called Winterkeep, and I really want to read it because if it's even a smidgen as good as Bitter Blue was, I need to get my hands on it. I'd like to go back and refresh my mind on everything that has happened in the series up until this point. And if I find I don't have the time to do all that, I would at least like to read Bitter Blue again. The next series is in the same vein, and that is the Books of Bayern series by Shannon Hale. I have already reread The Goose Girl, so now I just need to read Anna Burning, and then I will be caught back up to where I was, and then from there I can continue on with The River Secret and Forestborn. The third category is one that's going to be a little bit difficult to explain why I want to reread it, and that is books that I really enjoyed at the time that I read them and now think they might not live up to how I've built them up in my head. I realize it doesn't quite make sense why I'd want to read a book that I think will be worse than the last time that I read it, but it's really just for my own sanity and to know if I should still be recommending these books to people. So I'd like to know if they measure up to my own hype. The first book in this category is I Remember You by Kathleen Davitt-Bell. This book is really quite an interesting concept. It's following a couple in high school as they are having this unfolding relationship, but at the same time the boyfriend is experiencing these really weird flashbacks to memories that he does not recognize and doesn't think are his own memories. It's a really interesting book and I found it very moving at the time that I read it, but I'm just not sure it would hold up by my standards today. The second book in this category is The House of the Scorpion by Nancy Farmer. This book was one of my favorites at the time that I read it, which I think was like age 14 or so. It was either my freshman or sophomore year of high school. And it follows clones and kind of the ethics around cloning people and the struggles with identity that you might experience as a clone, and I thought it was really fascinating at the time that I read it. I recommended it to all of my friends, and now I'm interested to reread it and see if it's really that good and if I still like it today with my new perspectives. The third and fourth books in this category is The Hallowed Ones and The Outside by Laura Bickle. This was actually one of the first booktube recommendations that I ever took. I would categorize this duology as like YA Amish horror, which is really quite interesting. But anyway, I really enjoyed these books at the time that I read them. Again, I don't know if they would hold up to this day, and that's why I want to read them and find out. I was really hoping I could make it all the way through this video without needing to turn the lamp on, but it's getting really dark, so apologies for the artificial lighting. The fourth and final category in this list of books that I want to reread is books that I read, did not enjoy, but I think if I gave them a second chance, I might. Sometimes I really feel like certain audiobooks are just not a good fit for me, and the listening experience ruins my experience with the book. So I'm not saying I would read all of these books all the way through again, but I at least want to give them a second chance and start them and see if the reading experience is a little bit different the second time around. The first book in this category is 6 Stories by Matt Wesolowski. It feels like this book had all of the trappings of being like a really good thriller for me and a book that I really enjoyed. I really enjoy a podcast element. I really enjoy camp settings. So I feel like this book had a lot of things I like, but for some reason I just rated it really low. And I don't know if that was a fair rating in retrospect. So I kind of want to start this book again and see if it goes over better this time. Similarly, I also have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang on this list. Everybody seems to absolutely love this book, and it feels like a book that I should have loved because there were so many good elements to it and the writing was really strong. But I really feel like the audiobook just didn't do this book justice. Not that the narrators were bad or anything about the audiobook was wrong, but just that I didn't have like the brain power to focus in on this book the way that I needed to. Especially with such a dense fantasy novel, you really need to like concentrate to be able to follow what's happening. And I feel like my lack of enjoyment for this book has to be a me problem because so many other people have rave reviews for it. So I want to give this one a second go. And the third and final book in this category is The Inheritance of Orchidia Divina by Zoraida Cordova. This book centers around the very magical matriarch of the Montoya family, and we follow both her and her grandchildren throughout this book as they are learning about their grandmother and who she was, and we're learning about her right along with them. I feel like, again, I just didn't have the concentration and the right headspace to really enjoy this book the way that I could have, and I really want to try physically reading it again this time and seeing if I change my mind. I really wanted to enjoy these books. I'm surprised that I didn't, and I feel like something might be wrong with me, so I'm going to try rereading them and see what my opinions are on the other side of that. But anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, please take a couple extra seconds, drop a like, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I will see you all next week with a new video. Goodbye.